The vast expanse of the Zarketh Empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, ruling over countless species with an iron fist. Their fleets were unmatched, their technology superior, and their dominance unquestioned. For centuries, they had expanded without opposition, conquering weaker civilizations and bending them to their will. The Emperor, seated on his massive throne of obsidian and gold, gazed at the holographic projections of the known galaxy. His advisors stood before him, silent and respectful, waiting for his decision. Reports had come in about a lone planet, a world untouched by war, free from any empire's control. Earth. It was a strange anomaly, a planet that should have been conquered long ago yet remained independent. The Emperor's crimson eyes narrowed as he considered the implications. Every empire feared Earth, but no one spoke of why. Whispers of past failures and unexplainable disappearances floated through the records, but there was no proof, only rumors, ancient warnings that sounded like nothing more than superstition. The Emperor did not believe in fear. He believed in power, in the strength of his war fleets, and the unstoppable march of his empire. If Earth had remained untouched, it was only because no true force had tested it. That was about to change. The High Commander of the Zarketh Imperial Fleet, Lord Exel Torin, stood at attention as the Emperor issued his command. A full-scale invasion was to be launched. The fleet would descend upon Earth with overwhelming strength, forcing humanity into submission. Any resistance would be crushed, and the planet would be integrated into the Empire, like all the others before it. The command echoed through the war halls of the Empire, and soon the Grand Armada was assembled. Massive dreadnoughts, each the size of small moons, lined the void of space, their hulls gleaming with the light of distant stars. Thousands of warships stood ready, carrying legions of soldiers, battle machines, and enough firepower to destroy 100 planets. No world had ever withstood such an assault. Earth would be no different. The fleet began its journey, moving through the dark abyss of space, a sense of unease spread among the officers. The Empire had fought countless battles, yet this mission felt different. There were no official records of battles against Earth, no documented wars, no history of conquest. It was as if every attempt to attack the planet had been erased from existence. Some officers whispered among themselves, recalling stories of fleets that never returned, of commanders who vanished without a trace. But these were dismissed as myths, the fears of weak minds unworthy of serving the Empire. Lord Exel Torin himself scoffed at such foolishness. The Zarketh were supreme. No enemy had ever stood against them and survived. Whatever secrets Earth held, they would be exposed and crushed under the might of the fleet. The journey through hyperspace was swift, and soon, the blue and green world of Earth appeared on the fleet's sensors. The planet was strangely quiet. There were no planetary defense grids, no space stations guarding its orbit, no sign of war fleets patrolling its skies. It was as if the humans did not even anticipate an attack. Lord Exel Torin expected at least some resistance, but instead he found only silence. A strange, unsettling silence. The warships formed their attack formation, surrounding the planet like hungry predators. The invasion was set to begin, yet something felt wrong. There was no panic from the surface, no transmissions pleading for mercy, no desperate attempts to communicate. It was as if Earth did not care, as if it had seen this before. Scouts were deployed to survey the planet, but they never returned. The fleet's sensors picked up no signs of destruction, no wreckage, nothing at all. It was as if the scouts had simply disappeared. Zeltaron ordered another wave, this time with heavier escorts, but the result was the same. Ships vanished, crews lost, and yet not a single shot had been fired against them. The silence of Earth became suffocating, the weight of the unknown pressing upon even the most hardened warriors. The High Commander clenched his fists, frustration creeping into his mind. This was not how invasions worked. The enemy was supposed to resist, to fight back, to show fear. But Earth did none of these things. It simply existed, waiting. A sense of dread began to spread through the fleet, whispers growing louder, fear creeping into the hearts of even the most battle-hardened soldiers. Some officers suggested retreat, their voices trembling as they spoke of ancient warnings. They recalled the words of long-dead conquerors, those who had tried to subjugate Earth in the past. "Do not go near that world," the records had said. "It does not obey the rules of war." But Lord Exeltorin refused to listen. He was not a superstitious fool. There had to be a logical explanation. And if Earth refused to fight, then the fleet would simply take what it wanted. With a final command, the invasion was ordered. The warships prepared to descend upon the planet, weapons primed, ready to unleash devastation upon a world that seemed completely defenseless. Yet, just as the first ships began their descent, something changed. The stars seemed to dim, the space around the fleet growing unnaturally dark. Strange energy signatures appeared on the scanners, signals that did not match anything in the known galaxy. A deep, resonant hum filled the void, a sound that sent shivers through the spines of every soldier aboard the fleet. And then, without warning, the fleet's systems began to fail. Engines powered down, weapons deactivated, and the massive warships found themselves drifting, helpless. Seltorin barked orders, demanding explanations, but there were none. The darkness deepened, swallowing the ships one by one, their hulls vanishing into the void. Communications were flooded with screams, voices of soldiers begging for help before they, too, were consumed. Seltorin watched in horror as his grand armada, the pride of the Zarketh Empire, was reduced to nothing in mere moments. He had no idea what was happening, no enemy to fight, no battle to win. There was only the darkness, the silence, and the unbearable realization that they had made a terrible mistake. The last thing he heard before his ship was taken was a whisper, an ancient voice that echoed through the emptiness. "You were warned." And then there was nothing. The remnants of the once mighty Zarketh fleet drifted in the void, consumed by an unseen force, leaving only a few surviving ships to flee in terror. Their transmissions were fragmented, filled with desperate warnings, but before the Empire could make sense of them, the signals vanished into static. Those who had dared to challenge Earth were simply gone, erased from existence as if they had never been there. The Emperor, enraged by this inexplicable failure, ordered an immediate investigation. How could a single planet, one without fleets or defenses, reduce the might of the Empire to nothing? How had the greatest warships ever built been lost without even a battle? There were no explosions, no energy signatures of enemy weapons, just silence. It was this silence that disturbed the Emperor the most. Every world they had conquered had fought back. Even the weakest species had screamed in terror, begging for mercy, launching desperate last attacks. But Earth had done nothing. It had simply waited, and in the end, the invaders had vanished. The Empire's intelligence divisions scoured ancient records, searching for anything that could explain the mystery. They found old, forgotten reports, scattered logs from past attempts to conquer Earth, yet none of them provided a clear answer. They only repeated the same chilling message: do not engage. Earth is forbidden. But forbidden by whom? The Zarketh did not fear myths. They had crushed civilizations that once called themselves gods. They had erased empires that spanned galaxies. And yet here was a single planet that held no recorded battles and yet had never been claimed. The Emperor could not accept such an insult. A new fleet was prepared, this time with more caution, more scouts, more observation before direct action. This time, they would understand what they were dealing with before they made their move. As the Second Fleet approached Earth, the warships remained at a cautious distance. They scanned the planet with every sensor they had, searching for hidden weapons, energy sources, or anything that could have caused the disappearance of the First Fleet. The results were baffling. Earth was entirely ordinary. It had no planetary defense systems, no orbital weapons, no fleets hidden beneath its oceans. It was a peaceful world, filled with organic life, cities, and primitive space stations orbiting above. The humans themselves were fragile creatures, physically weaker than most species the Empire had encountered. Their technology was advanced, compared to pre-space civilizations, but nothing extraordinary. By all logic, Earth should have been an easy conquest, and yet no empire in history had ever claimed it. The Zarketh were not the first to try, but it was becoming clear that they would not be the last to fail. Despite their caution, scouts sent closer to the planet still vanished without explanation. No alarms were triggered, no defensive measures detected. The ship simply ceased to exist, their signals cut off mid-transmission, their crews never heard from again. Frustration grew among the commanders. It was as if Earth itself rejected intruders, not with force, but with an unseen presence, something beyond the understanding of even the most advanced minds in the Empire. Lord Exeltorin, who had been sent once more to lead this observation fleet, grew increasingly uneasy. He had survived the first attempt by sheer luck, escaping before his ship could be taken, and now he stood at the edge of the same abyss, staring into the unknown. He had always believed in power, in the superiority of the Zarketh, but standing before the silent world, he felt something unfamiliar doubt. To test the limits of this unseen force, unmanned drones were deployed. They moved toward Earth, scanning and transmitting data in real time. The fleet watched in silence as the drones reached the planet's upper atmosphere. For a few moments, everything seemed normal. The drones continued to descend, recording images of human cities, oceans, and mountains. There were no disruptions, no interference. Then, one by one, they began to fail. First, the visuals cut out, replaced by static. Then, the signals carrying the data were lost. Within minutes, every drone was gone, as if they had never existed. No explosions, no wreckage, just an empty sky where machines had been only moments before. Panic began to spread among the fleet. Some officers suggested retreat, others wanted to fire upon the planet in desperation, but Lord Exeltorin silenced them. Blind attacks had no meaning against something they did not understand. He needed answers. Why was Earth untouchable? What force protected it, and why did no one in the galaxy dare speak of it? It was then that he noticed something that sent chills down his spine. The humans were watching. From their primitive satellites, from their crude space stations, from the ground itself, countless human eyes were turned toward the sky. They had known about the fleet's presence all along, yet they had done nothing. No attempts to communicate, no signals of fear or surrender, just the unshaken silence of a species that had seen this before. Seltorn felt the weight of that silence pressing against him, the knowledge that Earth did not need to fight. It did not need to threaten or display power. It only needed to wait because it knew what was coming. He could feel it now, the same presence that had taken the first fleet, the same force that had erased all those who dared to challenge this world. It was not a weapon, not a fleet hiding in the dark. It was something else, something that did not obey the laws of war. The silence was not a weakness, it was a warning. The realization came too late. Without warning, the ships at the edge of the fleet began to disappear, their forms swallowed by an unseen force. One by one, the warships flickered and vanished, their crews unable to scream before they were taken. The panic that had been building now erupted into chaos. Orders were shouted, but no systems responded. The engines failed, the lights dimmed, and the void itself seemed to grow colder. Seltoron stood frozen, knowing there was no escape this time. Earth had already decided their fate. As darkness closed around the fleet, as the last remnants of the Zarketh forces were erased from existence, one final transmission was sent from the void. It was not from a human, nor from the Empire. It was something else, something that had always been there, watching, waiting. You do not belong here. And then, silence. The same silence that had kept Earth untouched for centuries. The same silence that would remain long after the Zarketh were forgotten. The Galactic Union had always believed that history was well documented, that every civilization's rise and fall had been carefully recorded. Yet, there were gaps, strange periods of silence where entire species had vanished, where planets once filled with life had become empty, lifeless husks. The scholars called these anomalies, unexplained erasures that had no logical cause. But in the vast and ancient archives of the Union, there was one name that appeared again and again, buried within the oldest records: Earth. A planet that should have been insignificant, yet every attempt to study it had led to missing ships, lost records, and the silent disappearance of those who ventured too close. The truth about Earth was hidden, locked away in history, and those who tried to uncover it were never heard from again. High Commander Val of the Zenthor Dominion had no patience for myths. He was a warrior, a leader of conquest, and he did not believe in stories meant to instill fear. When the Union refused to answer his questions about Earth, he saw it as weakness. If a single planet held secrets, then he would take them by force. He gathered a fleet and set course for the Sol system, determined to tear open the mystery that had eluded the galaxy for centuries. As they approached, his analyst reported that Earth was unremarkable, a simple world, technologically inferior to the Dominion, with no known defenses strong enough to resist an invasion. There was no evidence of any advanced civilization, no indication of hidden power. And yet, despite all logic, no one had ever conquered it. As Vale's fleet entered orbit, he expected resistance. Instead, Earth remained silent. There were no weapons fired, no fleets scrambled to meet his armada, only a world that seemed indifferent to his presence. But as his ships moved closer, strange things began to happen. The databases aboard his vessels started corrupting, data erasing itself as if something was reaching into their systems. Communications became filled with static, messages lost before they could be delivered. Then, the reports came ships in the farthest part of the fleet were vanishing. No distress calls, no explosions, just empty space where warships had been moments before. Vale's second-in-command, Captain Torin, hesitated. "Something is wrong," he warned. "This isn't normal. This planet, there's something about it we don't understand." But Vale refused to be deterred. He ordered a ground assault, determined to take control and uncover the secrets of Earth. Landing parties were sent down to the surface, but the reports they sent back made no sense. The soldiers spoke of strange feelings, of time shifting around them, of moments where the world seemed different, old ruins where there should have been cities, great monuments that no longer existed, and glimpses of landscapes that didn't match the maps. The longer they stayed, the worse it became. Soldiers became lost in places that should have been simple to navigate. Some claimed they had seen figures watching them from the shadows, but when they approached, there was nothing there. The past and present were blurring, overlapping in ways that defied reason. And then, like the ships before them, the soldiers stopped responding. One by one, the squads fell silent. Vale was furious. He ordered a full bombardment, determined to erase whatever force was toying with them. The ships locked onto targets, weapons primed, and fired. But the moment the first barrage struck, something changed. A pulse, invisible but undeniable, rippled through space. The Dominion warships froze, their systems failing instantly. The crews screamed as their ships crumbled around them, not from any attack, but as if reality itself was unraveling. Vale watched in horror as the fleet, the strongest force he had ever commanded, simply ceased to be. His own flagship, once mighty and indestructible, was now drifting helplessly. The stars around him flickered, and for a brief moment, he saw something that shattered his understanding of the universe. The sky itself seemed to peel away, revealing a different reality beneath it. He saw battles fought long before his time, fleets destroyed in an instant, empires that had tried to take Earth only to be erased from history itself. He saw beings beyond comprehension, forces that had existed long before the Galactic Union, watching, waiting, ensuring that no one disturbed what should remain hidden. Earth was not unprotected. It was guarded by something beyond the reach of time and space. It was not a world to be conquered. It was a place where history itself was rewritten, where those who defied its silence became part of the forgotten past. As Vale's vision cleared, he realized he was no longer aboard his ship. He stood on the surface of Earth, in a place that should not exist. Towering structures of an ancient civilization surrounded him, their inscriptions filled with languages he could not understand. And in the distance, he saw them, figures clad in forms that flickered between what was real and what was memory, guardians of a world that refused to be touched. They did not speak, yet their presence conveyed a single truth: Earth was not a planet to be conquered. It was a wound in time itself, a place where the past was buried for a reason. Those who sought to uncover its secrets did not return because they became the secret, lost within the history they had tried to reveal. Vale felt his body fading, his thoughts unraveling as he became part of the endless silence that had protected Earth for millennia. The fleet was gone. The Dominion would never know what had happened, only that another armada had vanished, another failed attempt to claim the Forbidden World. And as the universe moved on, Earth remained as it always had, silent, untouched, and hiding a truth that no one would ever live to tell. The exploration vessel Vortex 9 drifted cautiously through the cold void of space, its crew tense as they approached the abandoned planet of HFY 7. The world had been a thriving colony once, home to millions of beings from various species. Yet, without warning, all communication had ceased. No distress signals, no escape shuttles, just silence. When a Union fleet was sent to investigate, it too vanished. No wreckage was found, no signs of battle, just empty space where dozens of warships had been. Now, the responsibility fell upon Captain Rendell Briggs and his crew to uncover the truth. But the moment they entered the planet's orbit, a suffocating unease settled over them. HFY 7 appeared untouched from above, its cities intact, its structures standing as if life had never left. Yet, there were no lights, no signs of movement. The scanners detected no life forms, but that did not mean the planet was empty. Something was wrong, a feeling that clawed at the minds of the crew, an unnatural stillness that made the ship's systems glitch, as if reality itself was resisting their presence. Despite the warnings from his first officer, Lieutenant Curson, Captain Briggs ordered a landing. If there were answers to be found, they would have to set foot on the surface. The landing team stepped out into a dead world. The air was breathable, the gravity stable, but the silence was suffocating. The streets were filled with abandoned vehicles, doors left open, meals still on tables in houses, as if the people had simply stood up and walked away. Yet, there were no bodies. Not a single corpse, not even skeletal remains. It was as if millions of lives had been wiped away in an instant, leaving only the echo of their existence. Then came the whispers. Faint at first, like a distant wind, but there was no wind on this lifeless planet. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, gripping their weapons tighter. The whispers grew louder, words in a language no translator could decode, a presence that seemed to be all around them yet nowhere at all. A scream tore through the silence. Ensign Morrow, one of the younger crew members, was shaking violently, his eyes wide with terror. He pointed at something behind them, but when the others turned, there was nothing there. "It touched me!" Morrow gasped, clutching his arm. "Something is here." His suit's scanners detected nothing, but his skin had turned ice cold, frost forming along his veins. Panic began to spread among the team as more whispers surrounded them, pressing in like invisible hands. Briggs tried to keep control, but the tension was suffocating. They needed to leave. But before they could move, the world shifted. The shadows around them deepened, stretching unnaturally as the sky darkened. The buildings, once solid and untouched, now bore strange marking symbols that had not been there moments before. The streets, once empty, now had shapes standing in the distance, watching. Their forms flickered, shifting between existence and nothingness. No eyes, no faces, just silhouettes that exuded an overwhelming sense of dread. Then, without a sound, they moved. Chaos erupted. The crew fired their weapons, but the energy blasts did nothing. The figures were not physical in the way they understood. Instead, the darkness around them seemed to feed on the attacks, growing stronger with every desperate shot. One by one, the crew vanished. Not taken, not attacked, just gone, as if they had never existed. Briggs shouted orders, but his voice barely carried over the growing wail of the whispers, now a deafening chorus. His men screamed, their bodies twisting unnaturally before they dissolved into the air, leaving behind only their empty uniforms. Briggs turned, grabbing Curzon's arm, but his lieutenant's eyes were already glassy, his expression frozen in a mix of horror and understanding. "It's not killing us," Curzon choked out. "It's undoing us." Before Briggs could respond, Curzon faded, his form breaking apart like smoke in the wind. The captain staggered backward, his breathing ragged. His suit's systems were failing, his thoughts unraveling as the whispers became clear. They were not speaking an unknown language. They were calling his name. He ran, his footsteps echoing through the empty streets, but the city had changed. The buildings no longer looked familiar, their architecture twisting into something ancient, something wrong. He reached the landing site, only to find the Vortex 9 gone, as if it had never been there. There was no sky, no stars, only an endless darkness pressing down on him. He fell to his knees, the weight of the unseen horror crushing his mind, reality distorting around him. Then, suddenly, silence. Briggs opened his eyes, finding himself back on his ship. The crew bustled around as if nothing had happened, their voices normal, their movements routine. Confused, he turned to Curson, who was standing beside him, looking concerned. "Captain, are you all right?" he asked. "You froze for a second there." Briggs's heart pounded. Had it all been a hallucination? A nightmare? But as he looked down at his hands, he saw them flicker just for a moment. A glitch in reality. And then he understood. He had never escaped HFY 7. He had never left the surface. What he was experiencing now, the normalcy, the safety, it was not real. He was trapped within something far worse than death. He was part of the horror now, part of the unseen. And somewhere, out in the void, the next expedition was already on its way, unaware of the fate that awaited them. The emergency beacon pulsed weakly in the void, a dying heartbeat in the endless darkness of space. It had been drifting for weeks, its signal growing fainter with each passing cycle. No one should have found it. No one should have heard its warning. Yet fate had other plans. The deep space freighter Solstice Dawn, on a routine supply run, detected the distress call just outside the forbidden zone of Sector Omega-12, a place marked on every star chart with a simple directive DONOTENTA. Captain Dane Carter hesitated. The law was clear. Omega-12 was sealed, its history erased from public records, its very name spoken only in whispers. But a distress beacon meant survivors, and no captain worth his rank could ignore a call for help. As soon as they retrieved the beacon, the Solstice Dawn changed. The lights flickered, systems glitched, and the artificial gravity wavered. The crew felt an unease they could not explain, a cold presence that clung to their thoughts. The beacon's data was corrupt, its logs fragmented, but one message remained intact, a desperate, static-laced recording from a voice on the edge of madness. "If you hear this, it's too late. They know. They see you now. Spread the warning. Do not go to Omega-12. Do not seek answers. There is nothing left. Only the endless hunger." The message ended abruptly, but the silence that followed was far worse. Engineer Harper Wells worked tirelessly to extract more data, her fingers flying across the console, sweat beading on her forehead. "There's something buried in the files," she muttered, her voice tight. Something they tried to erase. The screen flickered, and then it appeared an image. A blurry, distorted recording of a massive structure floating in the darkness of Omega-12. It was not a station. It was something else, something ancient, pulsing with unnatural energy. Around it, debris drifted, ships torn apart, broken beyond recognition. And then, the static twisted into something almost like a voice, a whisper crawling through the speakers. "We see you." The ship's alarms screamed. The Solstice Dawn was no longer alone. A presence loomed in the void, something vast and unseen, pressing against the edges of reality. The crew scrambled to regain control, but the ship's systems failed one by one. The engines flickered, navigation refused to respond, and the artificial gravity pulsed in sickening waves. Harper clutched her head, her breathing ragged. "Something's here," she gasped. "Something is inside." The air grew heavy, the walls seemed to pulse, as if the ship itself was alive. One by one, the crew collapsed, their minds assaulted by visions of impossible horrors. Dane saw flashes of Omega-12, a dead sector, but not empty. The structure was not abandoned. It was waiting. It had always been waiting. And now, because they had heard the warning, it had heard them too. Desperation clawed at Dane's chest. He had to act. If they remained, they would not survive. He forced his body to move, fighting the weight of the unseen force pressing down on them. He reached the ship's emergency relay, fingers shaking as he began transmitting. A warning, one last message before it was too late. This is Captain Dane Carter of the Solstice Dawn. We have intercepted a distress beacon from Omega-12. We should not have answered it. If you receive this, do not seek us. Do not investigate. Leave the beacon where it is. Do not listen to its call. Do not let them know you exist. As he sent the transmission, the world around him fractured. The ship, the crew, the very fabric of his reality unraveled. And then there was only silence. The Solstice Dawn was gone. The beacon drifted once more, pulsing softly in the darkness, waiting for the next unfortunate soul to hear its warning too late.